Okay, I know what you're thinking. Why do this at all? Pokemon's moves can already be ranked by base power. What more could I possibly talk about here? The answer is that context is everything. Obviously, secondary effects can make a lower power move incredibly useful, and on the other hand, especially in a Nuzlocke context, poor accuracy moves make an otherwise great move unusable. But it goes beyond just the move's characteristics. It's also about who learns them, when you gain access to them in a run, and the opportunity cost of getting one move over another. Consider the move First Impression. Yeah, that was a very wolfy way of pronouncing that, enunciating that, hold on. Yeah, it's a bug move, and that sucks, but everything else about it is amazing. It's a +2 priority move, it's in a higher bracket than just about everything except extreme speed and fake out, and at 90 base power, it's the most damaging priority move in the game. But since it's a bug move, and it's only learnable by 5 evolutionary lines, 2 of which are new to Gen 9 in Low Kicks and Slitherwing, it unfortunately isn't going to end up relevant in all but the wackiest Nuzlocke runs. That's why First Impression, along with signature moves and a bunch of other rarely seen moves, won't be on this list. Again, I've hidden the 43 F tier moves in the text of this ad read. See if you can find them all. Today's video is sponsored by Manscaped. Let me clear up some confusion and present my astonishing submission to give some assurance to those in pursuit of the perfect razor. Wind will feel like powder snow on your freshly groomed electro ball high up in the sky. Attack the binding, constricting leafage you had down there before. God, it will make you faint. It almost looks like a vine. Whip out the waterproof lawnmower 4.0 that could even be used in a whirlpool full of bubbles, and step in front of the mirror. Shot full of confidence, as just shaving makes you look a full pound lighter. You will spit up all the negativity you've been absorbing like poison. Stinging, pecking, scratching while you're shaving are no longer an issue with Manscaped skin-safe technology. It's got a powerful 7,500 RPM motor. Now that's what I call rapid spinning. Even fire spinning, you could say. With Fury swipes through the dating app, you'll no longer have to skull bash because you're lacking confidence because of your downstairs hygiene. Have some future sight towards your dates where you could go rock climbing and get a licking clean egg. Bomb deals at Manscaped Wait, with 20% off with my link or code in the description. It's a dream. Either way, we should talk about some things that are scary for your balls. Clamps, metal claws, twisters, brutal swings, acid, steel rollers, poltergeists, sand tombs, super fangs, Psywaves, Octazookas. These are just Pokemon moves at this point. There's one thing that's even scarier though, and that's cancer. April is Testicular Cancer Awareness Month, and Manscaped has teamed up with the Testicular Cancer Society to make you guys aware of how important self-checking is at any age for men. Testicular cancer is the most common type of cancer in men, and self-checkups while you're, for example, using Manscaped products can often be really helpful in preventing it. Manscaped is making a big donation to the TCS, and you can head on over to manscaped.com/TCS to learn more or make a donation yourself. Let me wrap things up though, and cut back to the video. So let's take a look at the F tier moves all at once, and hopefully you'll start to see what I'm going for with this tier list. 88 of the 50 F tier moves ranked here have a base power of at least 100, proving power alone can't save a move. Accuracy makes Inferno and Egg Bomb useless because of how important consistency is in Nuzlocks. Additionally, these moves are all learned at a late game point where they are outclassed by other normal and fire moves. Skull Bash and Sky Attack aren't bad just because they're 2-turn moves, but unlike moves like Dig or Phantom Force, the user is left vulnerable during their charge turn, and that just isn't worth it. Again, these are late game moves that are completely outclassed. Steel Roller would be great at a perfectly accurate 130 move, but it requires terrain to be down or else it just fails. Similarly, Dream Eater would be great as a 100-100 move if it worked on opponents that were awake. Finally, Future Sight isn't worth the wait when you could just mash Psychic. 50 moves down, 314 to go. Keep those reasonings in mind as we get further into this list. The average base power of the moves in F tier is at just about 54, but before we continue on to C tier, we have to talk about a few oddballs, the moves that don't even have base power. So far, we've only been talking about damaging moves with a base power attached to them. There's a few types of moves in here. The 1-KO moves like Sure Cold and Fissure, currently having their moment in VGC, sit in C tier, as they are truly sometimes the only ways out of situations. There are some moves that work based off of speed. Electro Ball, which requires you to be way faster before you get much value out of it, is so tough to use as to fall to F tier. By the time a Pokemon gets this move, it also gets an electric move that is simply better. Gyro Ball, its counterpart, is A tier because you can ensure you'll be slower and able to get the value from slow steel-type attackers like Ferrothorn and Bronzong. There are also moves that are dependent on weight, on damage taken that turn, and a few other oddballs in here. Generally, the more your move relies on setup or your opponent's stats, the tougher it is to use effectively. Moves that rely on things you can control, though, can be really powerful. For example, Dragon Rage and Nightshade can be the most consistent forms of damage for early game mons, or bulky walls respectively. It might seem insane that Seismic Toss is a full tier below Nightshade when they do essentially the same thing, but let me try to explain how this tier list works again, because I know at some point even a YouTube commenter must understand. While the moves in a vacuum do the same thing, Seismic Toss is learned for the most part by early game fighting types whose regular attacking moves most likely will be doing more damage than Seismic Toss. As these fighting types evolve, their attack stat generally just rises over time, making the moves that they learn even more powerful and outdamaging Seismic Toss at essentially every point in the game. In the meantime, there are a lot of defensive ghost type Pokemon whose most damaging moves, especially early on, will simply be Nightshade. Therefore, you want to click Nightshade much more often than you would Seismic Toss, and therefore Nightshade is a better move in a Nuzlocke context. Please tell me this makes sense. Endeavor can be used well with pre-damage, and the moves that get stronger when your Pokemon has stat boosts, Power Trip, and Stored Power have incredible synergy with setup moves like Calm Mind or Bulk Up. Now, let's get to the C tier moves. For the most part, these are moves that are simply fine. Most of these moves sit between 40 and 80 base power. In the case of most of these moves, you can click them if you need to, but chances are your Pokemon has, or at least will eventually learn, a better option of that same type. But already we're seeing some of the most powerful moves in the game. On the 112 moves in this tier, 21 of them have a base power of at least 100. How is that happening so quickly? Welcome to the land of inaccuracy. Consistency matters in any Pokemon context, but especially in a Nuzlocke, where a miss might just mean your Pokemon is gone for good. When planning out a fight in a Nuzlocke, especially a high level one on a difficult ROM hack, you need to be able to rely on your moves doing what you plan them to do. Otherwise, your fight will spiral out of your control. Because there are so many fights in each Nuzlocke, over time you get more and more likely to miss one of these moves at a crucial moment. A move like Dynamic Punch, a 100 power 50 accuracy fighting move which always confuses its target on hit, would be a clear top tier move with perfect accuracy. Instead, it only escapes F tier because of its synergy with Machamp's No Guard ability. For the 150 base power moves, Hyper Beam and its various type clones, I could accept the slight mischance as a trade-off for the power, but combine the inaccuracy with the necessity of a recharge turn, and the opportunity cost is simply too high, unless you can guarantee you're finishing the fight with the move. Other powerful moves in this tier have some sort of incredible limiter preventing them from wider usage. Focus Punch requires some way of preventing damage on that turn, either Substitute or Sleep, and if you can guarantee either of those, you're probably in pretty good shape anyway. Last Resort requires an incredibly specific moveset, as it can only be used after every other move has been used. Ambipom or Kangaskhan could get use out of it on an old classic competitive set with Fake Out, but the fact that its niche is that small despite its power keeps it down in C tier. The average base power level picked up in a big way from F to C tier, jumping from 54 to 72. It doesn't actually move up that much from C to B tier. The average B tier move sits at just over 80, less than 10 points higher than C tier. B tier is defined by 3 kinds of moves. There's a bunch of decently powerful and perfectly accurate moves here, moves that are fine in a pinch that will probably be replaced as soon as you find the right TM or level up move. Even some really weak moves like Ember, Tackle, and Water Gun fit in here. They're moves that are useful so often in the early game that they wind up in B tier despite being outclassed by other moves in a vacuum. Again, to be clear about the point of this list, context matters, and while Tackle may not be the most impressive move, depending on the generation as 35, 40, or sometimes even 50 base power, the normal stab on very early game Pokemon, your Rattatas and your Lillipups, will carry you through super early game every now and again. Ember is good early on because you tend to face a lot of bug and grass types, and Water Gun is oftentimes your way of dealing with an early gym leader's Geodude. Some moves in C tier might be stronger on paper, but I guarantee you they won't get as much use in a Nuzlocke. Moving on, B tier also has weak moves with great effects. Priority moves like Ice Shard, stat dropping moves like Pounce, Icy Wind, and Struggle Bug, and the guaranteed paralysis of Nuzzle. There are some really powerful moves in this tier, including the 2 most powerful moves in the game in Explosion and Self-Destruct. In B tier, you won't get power without some kind of drawback, even if it isn't always as big as, losing your entire Pokemon. It's important to note, though, that a strategically placed Explosion or Self-Destruct can save you a run if you properly plan for it, as it not only might be able to take out an opponent's Pokemon, but also gives you a free switch into your next Pokemon. Especially on the Elite Four or a Champion, these moves could save your run. Water Spout and Eruption are 150 base power, 100 accuracy, unless you take damage, and the Pokemon that learn them simply just do not work with aggressive and fast sets. Head Smash and High Jump Kick can deal big damage to their users through crash damage or recoil. Outrage confuses you at the end, but more importantly locks you in during the fight, so you can't switch out for the next 2 or 3 turns after using it. If your Pokemon gets into danger in those turns, you have no more control over the battle. And then, just like before, there's our good friend Inaccuracy, and moves like Blizzard and Mega Kick that bring big power and are learned by a ton of Pokemon, but can result in empty turns. Blizzard's early availability by TM and incredible distribution actually makes it a quite interesting move. Just as an example, you can imagine a scenario where you caught a Wigglytuff in your Leaf Green Nuzlocke, and you might just want to teach a Blizzard for the upcoming Erica gym once you get to Celadon City. Otherwise, B tier is defined by moves that are good, but lack that extra upside that turns them into something you can click just about every run. Look at how many of these moves are perfect accuracy and between 50 and 90 base power. It's worth noting that a lot of these moves end up down here just because they happen to have a pretty bad offensive typing like Grass or Bug. Some moves are also unique in that they're sometimes the only physical or special option that type has. Spark, for example, is for a lot of physical electric type attackers the only electric type move that they will learn for quite a while. Serviceable moves. They'll get you to the next gym, but they're not the moves that are winning your runs consistently. Let's move up to A tier. The power difference between C tier and B tier wasn't much, but it was notable. The difference between B and A tier, a whopping 0.1 points as it jumps from 80.6 to 80.7. But A tier is where consistency is king. Out of 71 A tier moves, only 5 made it with imperfect accuracy. Play Rough isn't just the strongest physical fairy move, it's the only physical fairy move for most Pokemon that get it. Rock moves, similarly, don't have a great option for strong guaranteed damage. Stone Edge, Rock Slide, and Rock Tomb all still make A tier for 2 reasons. 1, Rock is an incredible offensive type. 2, these moves all have great upside, from Stone Edge's power and boosted crit chance, to Rock Slide's flinches and spread damage in double battles, to Rock Tomb's guaranteed speed control on hit. Snarl, similarly, gives a guaranteed stat drop, this time to special attack. It only gets better in doubles, where it hits both targets and effectively shuts down any special attacking threats. For the most part though, this tier is ruled by guaranteed damage. Sometimes it's with negative effects that are negligible, like the bundle of 120 base power, 100 accuracy moves that come paired with either stat drops, like Close Combat and Headlong Rush, or Recoil, like Brave Bird and Woodhammer. Moves on the weaker side, on the other hand, have some sort of positive effect to balance things out. Every 40 base power move in this tier is a priority move, and both 50 base power moves, Flame Charge and Trailblaze, grant a guaranteed speed boost on use. At 60 base power, we have Low Sweep and Bulldoze, fully accurate moves that also drop the opponent's speed. Are you seeing the pattern? Speed control is good, it turns out. A couple of these might be making you curious though, like what's Bite doing all the way up there? That's not a mistake on the graphic, Bite really is an A tier move, and again, it's all about context. Assurance and a few other Dark-type moves found themselves in F tier, and that's because they're simply outclassed by Bite. Pretty much everything that could use Assurance also learns Bite, so why would you ever click Assurance? Bite is one of the most valuable early game moves out there. Tons of Pokemon learn it, it provides critical coverage for a bunch of normal types, giving them a much needed way to hit ghosts, and it has an incredible secondary effect, causing flinches 30% of the time. If Bite had less distribution and was a late game learn set move for most of the Pokemon who learned it, it would be nowhere near A tier. But because it's one of those moves you are constantly looking to click in the early game, it finds itself all the way up here. Return and its counterpart Frustration are just so easy to use. Maxing out all the way at 102 base power, these moves are some of the easiest damage to access in the game, as all you have to do for Friendship is walk it out. It's absurd damage with Stab, or solid early to mid game coverage for just about anything with an open move slot. Most importantly though, this move is learned by pretty much every Pokemon in the game, and in most games you get access to it quite early. If you're a physical attacker, you want to have this move because for most of the game it's probably better than any stab move you get. There were a few moves in the set that were under consideration for S tier, but in the end wound up as the definition of gatekeepers between A and S tier. 2 in particular fit this role perfectly: Earthquake and Ice Beam. These moves are perhaps the most splashable physical and special moves respectively. If a physical attacker learns Earthquake, it's probably worth teaching it. If a special attacker learns Ice Beam, similarly, it's probably worth teaching it. These moves have no drawback other than Earthquake's area effect damage in doubles, but even that can be turned into an advantage. They're great on any Pokemon, stab or not, and you'll use them in just about every run. Ice and Ground are probably also the 2 best offensive types in the game, and their best respective moves with incredible distribution therefore make it to the top of A tier. And that should tell you just how good a move has to be to make it into the final tier. 357 moves down, only 7 remain. Without further ado, the S tier damaging moves. Moves that are so good that you almost certainly click them if you made it to the end of a successful Nuzlocke. Some of these moves are so good that you can put them on anything and it's worth it. Others are so good that it's worth looking for Pokemon who can exploit them just because they're that strong. The first 2 moves we'll talk about actually belonged in the previous section. the moves that don't have a standard base power. These moves would be Flail and Reversal, moves that calculate their power based on the user's remaining HP. At less than 4.17% HP remaining, these moves turn into 200 base power monstrosities. Like I talked about in the last section, these kinds of moves can be incredibly powerful when you have control over their damage calculation. Pre-damaging a Pokemon to 1 HP before a fight, let us ensure that Flail and Reversal are always at their max power. The best defense in Pokemon is sometimes a good offense. It doesn't matter how big of a threat is on the other side if you can just outspeed and kill it. It's a strategy so powerful it can make a match winner out of a Magikarp, and if that isn't S tier, I don't know what is. Technically, Facade is a 70 base power move, but part of what makes the moves in this tier so good is how easy it is to use them at their peak, and Facade is a perfect example of that. Facade's power balloons to 140 when a Pokemon is afflicted with a status condition. So as long as we come prepared by pre-poisoning or pre-burning a Pokemon, it's going to be max damage. Yes, even with burn attack drop doesn't factor in, it ignores the attack drop. How often do I have to say this in my videos until you guys... The fact that you can set up that kind of damage outside of battle rather than having to use something like Swords Dance to set up in a battle makes Facade one of the strongest tools a Nuzlocker could ever want. Our next S tier move is a weak one, and it's a normal type. At 40 base power, its power sits 32 points below the average base power of the moves in C tier and 14 below the average base power of the moves in F tier. That's just how broken the secondary effect is on Fake Out. Fake Out is simply free damage, as any Pokemon hit by it flinches 100% of the time. It can only be clicked on the first turn the Pokemon is out on the field, but that free turn of damage, even if it's small, is worth clicking all of the time against any non-ghost Pokemon. More importantly though, Fake Out is probably the most broken tool in the game for double battles. Forcing an enemy Pokemon to just skip its turn in doubles is an unbelievable tempo swing. If you switch a lot to reset your cooldown on Fake Out or have multiple Fake Out users, the move just gets exponentially crazier. It basically allows you to turn the 2v2 of a double battle into a 1v1 at any time, and that's enough to make it an S tier move. The final moves are here for their incredible utility and tempo. The idea that there should be a punishment for switching has been at the heart of Pokemon going all the way back to Gen 1. You can try to give yourself a better matchup, but doing so will open you up for a free hit from the opponent. This is also, of course, why hardcore Nuzlocks are played on set mode. There should be pressure on your decision to switch. And that's why all of the pivot moves, Flip Turn, U-Turn, and Volt Switch, are easy choices for S tier. The ability to deal damage while setting up for the next turn all in one motion has proven invaluable in just about every sweaty Pokemon context you can imagine. These moves are great in VGC, they're great in competitive singles, and if they're good against a human opponent who can expect your switch, imagine how good they must be in Nuzlocks where we can take advantage of foolish AI. Speedy and frail Pokemon can use pivot moves to get their damage while staying safe, switching in bulky walls to soak up the damage for them. Bulky Pokemon can use these moves to take hits for fast sweepers, enabling them to reach the battlefield while staying healthy and threatening more and more KOs. This utility means these pivot moves would still find use even if they were significantly less powerful, but at 60 to 70 base power, they actually pack a bit of a punch as well, hardly leading to the empty turns you'd expect when you're making a defensive play. So there you have it, 364 damaging moves ranked and rated. Do you agree? Did I underrate something? Make sure to let me know down in the comments. As always, I won't read a single one. Dude, that was basically one take, okay? That was pretty